Uribe, headed up by Professor Fu. I'd like to thank, as I said, the members of the board who are here. I'd like to thank my colleague, Professor Gantz. There he is. Professor Gantz was the co-founder of the LLM program at the National Law Center, and after a very brilliant directorship, will be retiring this year, although I see his name still as co-director, so that's a good sign. David is going to be giving a speech, as you know, at the closing of the meeting, and he was at the organization of the Pacific Rim First Colloquium in Santiago, so thank you so much for being with us. And then I'd like to express my appreciation to our sponsors. The sponsors, this is our commercial, starting out by Pac-Rim China, who has, as the general counsel, also a former student. I know Maggie Zhu is here. And then the CAF, or the Development Bank of Latin America, they'll make possible the fact that this meeting will be disseminated worldwide. The materials that we're in this meeting have been facilitated by the generous contract with CAF. We'd like to thank Microsoft, whose General Counsel for Asia will be present in the discussions on moderating the e-commerce chapter. We'd like to thank NBAF, Morrison, Brown, Argus, and Faga from Miami, Florida, for their sponsorship. At the group level, we'd like to thank the Signature Group from Costa Rica, represented by, in Central America, represented by Joaquin Picado, the Kilpatrick Townsend Stockton Law Firm, that our board member Jim Nelson convinced to become sponsors, and we're very grateful for that. Also the Commerce and Finance Law Firm of Beijing, a former student and trainee, Seiko Jin. The firm of Salvidia, Contreras, Nalaf, Northern Verdugo of Santiago, Chile, who sent a very nice delegation headed by Rodrigo Novoa. And then at the silver level sponsorship, the CFA, which is the umbrella organization of all the banks in the world that do security lending. The Counselors International Abogados firm, Entrada Group, Paul Karen, former student and also supporter of the center, RCI Capital, also former student, Yang. At the bronze level, we thank Luchans, represented by Hector Novoa, the AJP Attorneys of Law, and Wang Shan and Company of Shanghai. JP Morgan will be sending their counsel for the meeting on secure transactions law. Munger Chadwick, a local Arizona firm that unfortunately cannot be here. Shanghai Bush Law Firm, and the Rabi Law Firm, also of Arizona. I would now, having done our appreciation for all the present members of the center, advisors, board directors, etc., and our gratitude to the dean and to everybody who is here, I'd like to talk, hopefully for an hour. He said an hour and 15 minutes, but I don't know that I'll get there, on what is it that commercial law means today, and how is commercial law being made today in a way in which it makes sense from the standpoint particularly of economic development. So first of all, what is that is meant by commercial law? If you look at the premier code of the 18th century, 19th century, early 19th century, the French Civil Code of 1804, the French Civil Code of 1804 was not for commerce. It was a not-for-profit code. But there was a special code designated for it, the French Commercial Code of 1807. And its definition of what is commerce is basically intermediation between producers and consumers. This intermediation that they were referring to was on the heels of the collapse of the guild system. And as you know about the guild system did not really believe in independent commerce. It was craftsmanship, artisanship that was involved, and the concept of profit was based upon one, the most prevailing view by a theologian, Langenstein, who says that the profit of a guild can only be that which preserves the guild member's status in life. You cannot go beyond surviving where you were and be a guild member except for the master guild members. St. Thomas Aquinas had a different view. He thought that guild members should charge prices as just prices in what he called secundum aestimatione fori, in accordance to the estimation of the fori or the marketplace. So right there, you have two different views of what could be commerce. The guild commerce, which says, as a guild member, if you follow Langenstein's view, you cannot charge more than will preserve your station in life. Apparently, Aquinas' view is not the popular view. And then, when the commercial code of France started, profit was considered to be one of its transactions. But profit also had a very limited sense in the French commercial code, and even more limited in the civil code. Because the concept of profit, I remember once giving a talk of teaching a semester at Aix-en-Provence, and I was invited to one of the leading law firms in Aix, and they had beautiful books and all sorts of very expensive champagne and cognac. And then I asked them, what is it that you charge by your fees? Well, they said honoraria, but we are not really merchants. We cannot really exploit anybody. We just charge very respectable honoraria. It was a little bit of a guild mentality. Nonetheless, everybody was living very well, and they had a very nice office, etc. So the concept of the French Civil Code was that if you're a professional, like a lawyer, like a physician, you don't make profits. What you do is you charge honoraria. You're a glorified guild member. The commercial code had a list of acts of commerce. And when I was taught law for the first time, and I read that list, it was presented to me as extraordinary conceptual breakthrough. We now know what commerce is. We now know how to apply it, and that is, if you look at the list of acts of commerce, and it started out in Article 632 by a description of somebody who buys goods or raw materials from somebody else and sells it to somebody else for a profit. And then a list of 14 other acts of commerce, and that's it. That's it. That's what commerce means. Now, at first I thought, why make it such a numerous clausus, even though they did not say it was a closed number of acts of commerce. But then, the longer I looked at it, and the more I read about commercial law, it turned out that Napoleon was not very fond of merchants, and was not very fond of commerce either. Napoleon's view of the ideal member in society was the landed gentry, the bourgeois. And the principal transaction was the sale of real property. The sale of personal property, removable property, was secondary stuff. And when he referred to England, he referred to this country in a way despectively as un pays de boutiquiers. This is a country of shopkeepers. The Brits are the shopkeepers. We are in France not necessarily the merchants. In fact, the merchants devices because they were used to avoid the charge of usury. At that time, usury in France and Spain, and to a certain extent in Italy, usury was that which you charge, regardless of the interest rate, that which you charge for a loan, might be 1/3 or 1%, that would still be usurious. And the bill of exchange was used to simulate or to mask loans by pretending that it was an instrument with which you purchased foreign currency. So you would not call it a loan, you would call it purchase of currency, and the only way in which that bill of exchange could be used was the requirement of what they call distantia loci, the distance between the place where it has been issued and the place that it was collected, to make sure that it was a sale of foreign exchange and not the loaning of money. There was at that time a very famous case in France, heard before the Commercial Court of France. It was a so-called red ink case. The red ink case was one involving a courtesan, a prostitute, who had gone to bed with a bourgeois, and in a fit of passion, the bourgeois lover signed this bill of exchange with his blood, and it was known as the red ink case because he had signed an instrument that said that I will pay you this amount of money, or order somebody else to pay this amount of money for a period of time. The commercial court, which was always under suspicion of being usurious, decided that the thing to do was not to try to enforce or not to enforce a bill of exchange, but in a moment of great equity said, you have to marry. You, the bourgeois, you have to marry this prostitute. Now, when Napoleon read this, he was furious. See, he says, this is another example of using these commercial tricky instruments like bills of exchange in order to violate the law of usury. So when you read the first version of the Acts of Commerce in France, you will see that bills of exchange can basically only be used by merchants. And they cannot be enforced if the party signing it or accepting it wants to remove the case from the commercial jurisdiction to the civil jurisdiction, governed by the civil code, as if it were a non-profit transaction. You could do that. Now, that will give you an idea of the meaning of commerce under Napoleonic Act of Commerce. So that list of acts of commerce, I'm looking at Mr. Priego because in Mexico there was a professor that I was very friendly with, Professor Barrera. He devoted a whole tome to this classification of acts of commerce. If you picked up in Argentina the leading book on commercial transactions by Professor Maragariga, he had 25 pages of definitions of acts of commerce, as if it were a great breakthrough. In effect, what Napoleon wanted to do was a cordon sanitaire. He wanted to say, this is for these tricky merchants to use. The rest of the people, the bourgeois landowners, the nice people that pay taxes, those are the people that should be governed by a good code. He was extraordinarily proud of his civil code. That recently I watched a show on television, somebody who wrote the definitive biography of Napoleon. The thing that he was most proud of was his civil code. Now, the problem with that civil code is that that civil code is the subsidiary law for the commercial code. When you have no provisions in the commercial code, you go back to the civil code and you say to yourself, that's what applies. Now, the manner in which the civil code was written was also problematic from the standpoint of commercial law, commercial transactions, because it used what is known as an Aristotelian logic, or the logic of essences. When that code was written, the logic was that if you think very hard as to what should be a transaction, and you look at the Aristotelian method of definition, you will find that Aristotle said that you define by finding the essence of the thing, which is that which is universal and permanent in the thing. Nothing could be that but that essence. A chair could only be a chair that has these characteristics. The moon, the sun, whatever, has its own characteristics, and that's the way to To define it, you place the species within the genus. In this case, let's say that you're talking about contracts. There is a species which is obligations. There is a genus which is obligations, voluntary obligations, or involuntary obligations. The genus then becomes a species of voluntary obligations, which are contracts. That's fine. That's a beautiful exercise in observation of a limited universe. But when you take that definition further, there were some other great definers, like Hugo Grotius and Samuel Pufendorf, who contributed greatly to this code, and they thought that a contract, listen to this now, a contract is the result of the will of the parties. That means that two parties, only two parties, could create a contract. Which means what? Which means that if Alibaba today were to function with this definition of contracts, it could not do business. Same thing with Amazon, the stock exchange, or anything else. Why not? Because that is a world populated by what the Germans call firm promises. Promises that you yourself issue, and they're binding on you, the issuer, regardless of whether there is an acceptance by the recipient of it. And in the world of Grotius, Pufendorf, Mortier, that would be what they call a policitation, that is to say, an unaccepted offer. And that could be canceled at any time. So the French Civil Code version of contract was a 17th, 18th century version of contract in which only when there had been an agreement between the two parties, and the agreement in some cases had to be ceremonially recorded, did you have a contract. Short of that, you could not even place an offer for a reward and have any fight, because I can cancel it, I can revoke it at all times. This, as you know, is not commerce. Commerce, more and more, you sit in front of your computer, you issue an order to buy stock or to buy goods or whatever. Imagine what would happen to Alibaba if you place an order and then it's the moment that you got the goods, you say, I changed my mind. I didn't get your acceptance of that order. Or I buy stock and then suddenly the broker says, you know what? I decided that not until there was full agreement between you and me that that stock order could be executed. So the French Civil Code was a code geared for basically the most important of transactions, which is real estate transactions. It was not geared for commercial contracts. And the merchants were not really somebody that you could be proud of being associated with or having your daughter marry or anything else like that. Merchants, particularly small merchants, were the second or third class citizens. Now, this is not the only view of commerce that you have. There's a gentleman named Karl Marx who had a pretty much similar view of what it was to be commerce. To him, it was inherently exploitive. To be a commercial transaction, that surplus value that you get from selling something is definitely wrong. It's sinful. He didn't say it was sinful because that would have been a religious term, but that's the way in which he said capital is created at the expense of others. So again, that's another view of commerce, but don't think that those views are limited to one or two other legal systems or religious views. Even within the very capitalistic nation of the United States, you had versions of commerce that were influenced by a certain view of commerce in commercial man that was not always very realistic or eulogistic. We had one of the most respected justices in the United States, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, a true giant when it came to constitutional law, and when it came to criminal law, some of the doctrines prevail to this day. Holmes was asked by his father, a very distinguished physician, challenged his father challenged Holmes to really say something very original about the law in his little tome, The Common Law. And one of the things that Holmes said in The Common Law was the following. What is it that a contracting party has a right to claim from the other country party? He says, the just so happens that Holmes was a great admirer of Thomas Hobbes, whose vision of man was man is the wolf of man. So his vision of the contracting party was not a cooperative vision. It was a very warlike vision. We're war rather than we're. And what's happened since all those views were issued is that finally, as we are approaching the beginning or entering the beginning of the 21st century, the sciences, particularly the biological sciences and the social sciences, have taught us that all these visions of man are not scientific at all. There is a great biologist, his name is E.O. Wilson, he and many others have shown that man belongs to one of the species on Earth in a book that he calls The Social Conquest of Earth. A group of species which includes ants, which includes bees, which includes some of the species of the butterflies, etc. These species have lived the longest. These species have been able to propagate the most and have the healthiest colonies because of something that they have in common with man, which is cooperation. Man, together with those limited number of species, are best at cooperating with each other. In fact, are the supreme cooperators. There have been some experiments contrasting man with the closest animal species to man, chimpanzees, different games in which children, a group of children, play with balls or with other toys. And when one cannot succeed in that game, another child comes in and helps the first one to do that. You repeat that game with chimpanzees, and what occurs, what ensues, is a total tribal battle. There is no way in which any species other than those that the sociobiologists have identified cooperate as well as man. And commerce is the supreme word, the supreme way of cooperation. Commerce, well understood, is contrary to, say, war or to exploitation. Commerce is the supreme form of cooperation, and man is a cooperator. A city like Shanghai would never have occurred unless there was cooperation in the process of building the city up. The same thing can be said about markets and fairs and everything else. So, knowing that that's the nature of man, then the question becomes, what is the way in which commerce in commercial law can best be